Afternoon. Welcome to today's Fireside Chat. We want to thank our curriculum provider and partner WazU for making chats like these possible. And then for those who don't know me, my name is Else Louise. I am the manager of Entity's Mentor and Coaching Network. So nice to meet all of you. I'm very excited to introduce you all to Scott Gordon, who is Executive Vice President of Partners at Adstra. Today, he will be talking about the myriad ways that marketing and data science intersect in the real world, which will benefit our students across multiple disciplines. Our discussion will be moderated by Stephanie Stanton, a correspondent for NBC and creator of the amazing website and community careerchick.com. And now I'm going to pass this over to Stephanie so we can get started.
Thank you so much, Elsa. I appreciate you, and thank you all for being here for this fireside chat. As she introduced Scott Gordon, he is the Executive Vice President of Partners with Adstra. And Scott, you are going to talk about the rise of data science in your field from a marketing perspective. So before we get started with that, let's talk about your company and what it is you are doing. Tell us a little bit about your background. And how you got involved in marketing, and then we'll spin it on into data science.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited. We get to talk about my favorite topic, which is data. Absolutely love data and data science. So as you mentioned, I work with Adstra. We are a data company that enables brands and some big tech, MarTech, adtech companies to better understand consumers and to market to them. And so I like to refer to my colleagues at Adstra as my data fantasy league. So a few years ago, a group of people that I worked together with, formerly I was at Experian, before that I was at TransUnion, where I held roles in partnership, marketing, and product, and a group of colleagues that I worked with together who'd gone on to basically rebuild Acxiom, help sell them off to IPG. They were involved with LiveRamp, a lot of amazing companies. And they went ahead and found some private equity money, bought a small little data company. And about that time in my career, I was ready for a change. And I said, you know, for once, I'm going to choose the people I want to work with rather than the company. And so today I run all of our partnerships and sales for our indirect channel, which is basically anybody that doesn't relate to a brand. Think agencies, agency holding companies, think anyone in the Lumascape, the adtech ecosystem, such as a publisher, a walled garden, et cetera.
Thank you for that. So, you know what, you said something that struck me is how you said you wanted to choose the people that you work with this time around, and you were lucky enough and fortunate enough to have that. Let's start this discussion with that. How important is it these days to, work with a team that you enjoy? I mean, life is short. We spend so much of our time at work, and, we really shouldn't settle. I mean, that's at least the way I feel.
I couldn't agree more. When I look back at my career and the things that I did right and the things that I did wrong, there were always good parts of every role I've had. I've learned a lot, but really this was the first time in my career where I'd proactively moved myself out of my comfort zone. So previously, when I joined Experian, before then, I was running my own consultancy. How did I get there? I lost the job that I had and doing just entry-level marketing. And I was forced in the position where I started my own company and ended up helping struggling tech companies to bring their products to market. You would have developers that would be given millions of dollars, and then the investors would say, well, there's no sales. I say, well, guess what? You just gave a developer millions of dollars. They developed a product. They didn't market it at all. So they would hire me and my team, my colleagues. We had a flex team. We brought in really talented people to help relaunch these companies. And that went great until about 2008, 2010. We all remember the market cratered. And so I was forced out of my comfort zone again. I ended up at Experian. And there I thought I'd made it, right? I was at a big company, Fortune 500, all amazing resources and amazing experience. Was able to learn quite a bit on the job, gave me exposure and actually pushed me into the data field that I'm in today, gave me access to the mentors across multiple divisions. I was really good at networking across my way, across different groups, because as you probably know that Experian has many different siloed organizations globally. But at some point, I hit a cap, and then my work product very candidly suffered a little bit, and ended up moving over to TransUnion. So then next role, same thing. At that point, I realized I could see the signs. You see the trends that are happening, and you realize, wait a second, I keep making decisions out of necessity, not out of choice. And so I proactively opted out of TransUnion to join a group of people who were doing something that I was passionate about and who had a shared vision. But arguably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I want to add something of my own experience to this, because I reached a point in my career, in my media career, where I just flat out decided I only want to work with good people. And it took a lot of, quite frankly, getting beat up. A lot of that was my own choosing,
Mhm.
flawed thinking. I'm young, I got to put my, self to the grindstone. I got to be a yes man. I got to do everything. And which is all good. Those are all good. But I think that, I reached a point in my, older years, that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And if I can impart that to younger people, really anyone at any stage in their career, but to younger people, is not to spend so much of your youth settling. Yes, you want to work hard, you want to do that job, and sometimes you're going to have to take the jobs that nobody wants. But there does come a point where it's not good for your mental health. And so I applaud you. It sounds like you kind of reached that same epiphany as I did. And I hope that the younger people on here won't take as long as I did to realize that life is too short not to work with good people. So anyway.
And such a great point of taking the job that someone's unwilling to do. And I won't say that the job I took was something that I was unwilling to do, but I had a lot of friends and colleagues at my level, right? We had reached senior management status. We'd gone through the executive training components, who were in either by choice or by force in the same position I was in. And when I called our CEO, Rick Irwin, I said, Rick, you've been trying to get me to follow you into a couple of roles for a couple different companies, and I've always been reluctant to take that leap. I said, I will do anything. Whatever role you have, I will take. I don't care about the title. I only ask for two things: the opportunity to move up and the opportunity for exposure. And that last one was critical to me because it's funny. I have a lot of friends that are entrepreneurs, and I feed off their energy. They're such amazing people in a lot of different fields. And I find that all of them build by learning from someone else. So they're
Mhm.
not reinventing the wheel. They're just listening to other mentors and other people that are guiding them, and they're running playbooks. And I said, Rick, I know you're running a playbook. I know that you're following a path and you have a game plan, and I want to know what that is. And so the entire senior leadership team, of which I'm now a part of, which is great, but before then, they were all very open, whether it was finance or HR or the marketing department, you name it. At Adstra, they're completely open in a way that was never happened at any other company I'd worked at before, where I was able to glean as much information, which actually made me a better employee because I now was able to connect the dots between a lot of different activities that would previously be held in silos where people were worried about being disintermediated out of their job. Why are you asking me these questions about my role? Are you trying to take my job? Are you trying to report on me? That level, when you work with people that are comfortable in their roles and their work products, that aren't threatened, that just are best of class, I think that's goes back to your earlier point. You pick the people, you don't pick the company.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Good for you. I'm so glad to hear that. Can you, we'll talk about, we're going to start talking about the data science and layer that in, but I do want you to paint a picture, if you will, so I can understand better, and all of us too. What, if you can give me an example of like a campaign of Adstra, like maybe something that you guys have done, maybe something we might know or have heard of, so we can understand your company's role in how you made that happen.
Got it. So a lot of the stuff we do, we have confidentiality agreements. So I can't refer to clients specifically, but I can talk generally about some of the problems that we solve
Okay,
and use, I won't name names. How's that?
perfect.
Um, One of the most recent wins that we had where our objective in this industry, so the people that Rick and team brought together to build Adstra are people that built the leading data companies in our industry. So they built the identity graphs for Experian, Axiom, and in some part LiveRamp. These are the people that help build the infrastructure for companies like the Trade Desk and Newstar. If you know data, these names are very familiar to you. They are the behemoths. And what inevitably happens in these companies is that, especially when they're publicly traded, is that they end up running into trouble because they're just trying to get their extra 7% a year growth. And they'll do that either by raising their prices or cutting their expenditures, which includes their people sometimes. So we saw an opportunity to come in with a product that was, in some cases, we like to use the phrase that our client used, which I love. It's pleasantly familiar. Sometimes you don't need a better widget. Sometimes clients, in this case, for our data attributes, think demographic and psychographic data sets, the core ones, age, income, marital status, friends, kids, people don't want that to be different. That messes with data models. You want it to be familiar, but you want easier use, whether it's economic or access to it or data rights. So we have gone to market with our product sets. What's the problem that our client had? Our client was one of the walled gardens, but not a Facebook or a Google. So they weren't collecting a lot of these data signals that are coming in across basically consumer usage, right? As we use Gmail, as we use search, as we use Facebook and Instagram, data points are being collected about us that are used to then market products to us on those platforms. Some of the walled gardens don't have that. They're lacking those underlying layers. So we were able to go in and license a set of just core demographic and psychographic attributes. These are all collected with privacy policies in place. We have a really strong, amazing privacy team. And we created an economic model that was flat fee, all you can eat. Now, that's great for our client because our client is now able to compete on par from a data perspective with these behemoth companies that are larger than that have basically data that's been collected from consumers instead.
Interesting. Very cool. Yeah. We are still trying to figure out how Facebook and Instagram and these guys are able to, pop up an ad about something we talk about. Do they listen in on our, is that really true? Are they, sometimes they can read my mind, and that is no joke.
Sometimes it would appear that way. I think more often than not, it's that psychological effect of, like I bought a Jeep and suddenly I see Jeeps everywhere. And
Okay.
there are certain times where there is connective tissue. And when you think about it, so there's a move, right, for privacy, which is great. We're a big supporter of privacy. We enact CCPA, which is for California. We enacted that nationwide. It just made sense to us. We honor opt-outs, so someone can come to us and opt out. They can come to the IAB, the DAA. We honor multiple opt-outs within an industry, including with clients. And the way we're collecting and storing data is at the individual level. So what used to happen is you would opt out on a browser and you would only be opted out on that machine, on that browser. And if you deleted that cookie, your opt-out disappeared. We actually opt out at the personal level. So when Scott Gordon opts out, no client that works with Adstra will get Scott Gordon's data. Scott Gordon is redacted from all those components until Scott Gordon opts back in again. So as we look at those walled gardens and some of the ways that they connect the data, they're connecting data through multiple different data signals. When you think IP address, you think obviously cookies are still in play, mobile IDs, there's some direct mail components to it as well. And so all of these data signals get fed into big computers and cloud-based instances using machine learning to develop propensities. In some cases, you could actually be receiving an offer that maybe your neighbor looked up, because some of these are not targeted at the individual or household level, they're a little broader. And so, yeah, if you think about it, right, like let's say perhaps that you and your neighbor both receive a direct mail campaign for, I don't know, window washing. And then the next thing you know, you're on television and you're watching TV and suddenly you see window washing ads. It could be very well that isn't targeted at you, it's targeted at something broader that you just happen to recognize and be familiar for yourself.
Oh, that's interesting. So if I see anything kind of like weird or risque. Maybe my neighbor's up to something strange. I don't know.
I would recommend opting out of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you have to imagine that, and the industry has done a great job of this, of creating checks and balances and controls. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think the industry thinks it's perfect. It's this balance between the needs of the marketer to better utilize their marketing dollars to reach consumers, and the needs of the platform to offer service that they offer and to sell advertising against that, and the needs of the consumer. And obviously the needs of the consumer and the privacy of the consumers comes first. I think the systems that are in place make sense. I think some of the, and this is just one person's opinion, obviously, but I think some of the regulations make sense too. I mean, who reads a privacy policy that's 30 pages long? No one. But at the same time, there's a personal responsibility. If you're going to do certain things, you have to realize that people just don't do things for free. So I would advise not doing any of those, which Game of Thrones characters am I? You can avoid all those. It's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that your job is, look, I asked this question with let me give you a little bit of background. My husband works in advertising, and he does a lot of digital advertising. And about 10 years ago, I mean, he would even say to me, like, gosh, this is like the Wild West. He goes, this is so weird. Do people know that they're just literally giving away this information? Now, as time has gone on, he knew all this was happening because he was in the industry. A lot of people, myself, I didn't know. It was until I learned from him.
Mhm.
Do you think that it's going to make your job a little more difficult as a marketer now that we might be sort of getting out of that Wild West phase? As you said, there are some regulations and things that are coming into place now, or do you just have to get a little more creative?
Oh no, we absolutely welcome it and we love it. Again, and not to sound altruistic, but we do think it's the right thing to do by the consumer.
Yeah.
But
And same with my husband too. Like he was even like, gosh, this is not like something's weird. This has got to be, we've got to figure this out.
absolutely, there's always a path forward. And I would, in particular, and this is one thing I would recommend to anybody who's thinking about a career in data science or in the data industry, is get comfortable with regulated data sets. So I've had the privilege, or I've been lucky enough, been blessed enough to work both on the marketing services and the credit side of two large credit bureaus. And then I've also had the opportunity to work in the health and wellness space. So I think pharma and regulated data sets on that. And the way we approach it, even at Adstra, where a majority of the team came from those worlds, is that there's always a path forward and a right way to do it. It's about how do you do it. And so it's good to be cautious about it. And it's good to be respectful of the data and the data rights of consumers. But it doesn't mean that you can't do anything with the data. It just means that you have to follow the right protocols to do it.
But yeah, that's very well said. And this question here kind of plays off that. What types of changes have you already seen happen that you think may phase out in the next 5 years, just with regard to data and marketing?
Yeah, so in that space, I think about things like, and this is a byproduct of this whole move for privacy. And I don't know the right answer for this, but what we observe in the industry is that the move for privacy and the move for ownership of data actually creates greater strength within the walled gardens, the Facebook, Amazon, Google's of the world, where they're restricted now from sharing data in any capacity. So you see a lot of companies now that are rushing out to create their own unified IDs, they're calling them. And these IDs are, I mean, there must be about 10 of them now, and it's more than any advertiser can utilize, but it's meant to be an ID that you could share. It's a consumer ID, consumer level ID, that could be shared amongst different publishers or different participants in the ad tech ecosystem. So my measurement provider, my demand side platform, my DMP, all connected with a unified ID. Trade Desk has one, Xandr has one, I think Lotami just announced one. They're popping up like crazy. We haven't created a unified ID across multiple platforms. We just accept them all. I think at some point there's just too many IDs out there, and they're going to have to consolidate into a handful that really makes sense for the consumer. That's one thing I see. Another thing is this rise of the CDP. And that's basically this, kind of, it isn't a data bunker, but it's a data warehouse with an inner identity layer on top of it. And I think it's well intended. I don't think it really solves the full problem of the advertiser. It doesn't, you can utilize the data, doesn't really kind of address the activation components to it, nor the measurement side of it. So I don't know where we'll see those in the next 5 years. I think you'd probably see those waning too. But listen, I don't have a crystal ball. I could be completely wrong about these things. The one thing I do know about our industry is that there is always change. And
Mhm.
so when we built our platform, we built it from the ground up in the cloud to be dynamic, to accept any kind of ID, to fundamentally be a shift between one thing to another. We could easily transition because we knew that different regulations would come about and different IDs will come about and different devices will come to bear, right? Think the new wearables or the audio driven devices. Like all of these have different signals and inputs, and how do you translate them back into something that's usable by the data scientist, by the marketer, in order to affect, you know, cash positive campaigns. So yeah, I don't have a crystal ball. Those are the areas where I kind of see some weak spots that could probably change in the next 5 years.
Interesting. This is a good time to ask this question. How will AI influence how data is collected and used in the future? You talked about devices, new ways of doing things.
Everybody, what's the one thing everybody wants? They want it faster, right? They want
Mhm.
faster results. And you look back at history, and it used to be just direct mail, right? You would put something in the mail and someone receives the mail. There were no cell phones. Gosh, I'm dating myself. Um, but but now, right, multiple devices, campaigns are a lot more complicated. When they used to say that, the advertiser only knew they knew that 50% of their campaign was spend was effective. They just didn't know which 50%. And that's a quote from like the 1800s. It hasn't really changed. They're still trying to figure this out. So with AI and machine learning, I kind of lump them both into the same component because they're slightly different, but they're related. You have the ability to ingest significantly more data sets and basically to keep up with technology. If we didn't have AI, we wouldn't be able to ingest all of the data sets that are coming in and make real-time decisions that could impact campaigns. And so again, it's funny, you look at television and you look at movies and you wonder which is influencing which, but it's very much a minority report component where someone's walking and they do an action and then suddenly the advertising is adapting to that action. And I think that we're not there yet, but we see digital out of home and the growth there. It's really exciting. We see, and advertisers are like, well, great, I have digital out of home, but I don't want to show an ad to somebody that's already a customer of mine. If I'm going to put incentives out there and try to drive my prospecting, how do I adapt to people that are already currently a customer? And how do I create that real-time loop? Again, we're not there. How many times have you bought a product and then you received an email or saw an ad a couple days later that offered the same product or even a discount on that product? And have you scratching your head saying, well, maybe I made a bad purchasing decision? We've been rehabbing a house, bought a whole bunch of appliances, and suddenly all I'm seeing is still appliance ads that some advertiser is paying for,
Yeah.
right? Wasted on me. I already
Yeah.
made the purchase. So I think that, to your question, AI is going to drive a lot more efficiencies by allowing real-time engagement of all these data assets, including as they continue to expand and grow. Gosh, I have enough devices, but clearly not everybody does.
Yeah. Well, and we are also renovating a house, and you could do what we did. We bought an entire ring system, and one day later got the card for the 20% off rings. So guess who I called and got my 20% off?
Exactly. But not only the discount component of it, but the wasted dollars of the direct mail side of it. And we've proven through previous campaigns that you need multi-touch, right? That especially the way consumers operate today, where we're all sort of distracted, we have our phones and we're watching television and we're doing multiple things at once. You need to hit people with a softer message. People want to feel like they're engaged and having a conversation with a brand to some extent.
Yeah.
And so I think that technology is the only thing that's going to enable that in a real capacity. Now we talk about AI and we talk about the ability of these bots and the ability to communicate and like humans. Boy, they're getting really good, right? They're almost scary. Um, I haven't seen anyone from an advertiser level other than website activity where someone's logging on to Lowe's.com and trying to buy something and they have a chatbot come up that kind of helps guide you through that. But it's getting there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting to see this. Talk about our students, obviously they're data science, what types of roles could they go for, types of jobs as it relates to, what you do, the rise of data science in the marketing and advertising realm?
Right. First of all, I think data scientists are the new rock stars. I'm not a data scientist by trade. Though I am effectively a trained sales engineer. I understand, and when I build teams, sales teams, I require them to understand data and data science, engineering and processes. For that matter, I require them to understand legal language and sales negotiation. I think these are core competencies. My friends that are data scientists, there is no lack of employment for them. It's amazing to me. We've talked about how I was from Vegas, and a lot of my friends are in the restaurant world. And the good chefs because they're quickly moving from restaurant to restaurant, better, always a better restaurant, an additional Michelin star. They're in demand. And I'll talk to my friends and 18 months later that are a new company making more money with greater package, and they just keep kind of matriculating up, which I think is wonderful for them. I think that having the core competency of a data science background enables you to do pretty much anything in ad tech that you want. And I'll give a caveat though. I think that the best data scientists that I've seen aren't just pure play data scientists. They understand context, they understand how to communicate with clients and their own colleagues. They understand how to suss out what the real challenge is rather than they get away from the numbers. They step back from the numbers and they look and they say, here's the problem that's trying to be solved. I know, Mr. Client or Miss Client, here's what you're asking me for, but here's what you really are asking. And those are the data scientists that really drive the needle, because at the end of the day, like, what's the best way to put this? I always look at roles and how they get commoditized. And I think that crunching numbers and doing the data science and just looking at the numbers straight on, eventually that's a role that's going to become, AI is going to take a part of that. But the people that can understand the context and understand the goals and then do the interpretation and understand both components of those, I think those people have, and by the way, I don't think the AI is going to take over data science anytime in our near lifetime, but I do think that the people that have that, those are the people that make the most money. They drive the most impact for organizations. They are the people that are most respected in an organization. We have a ton of data scientists, very talented people. I've worked with others in other organizations. And that's clearly the delineator I've seen across multiple companies that have focused on data, is that the people that raise their hand and engage outside of their swim lane and data science or elsewhere, those are the ones that tend to end up in a better position.
Yeah, it's funny. We've done several of these fireside chats, and your message is interesting because it's really resonating, because you're not the first person that I've heard this from. It's really about a diverse set of skills. It's one thing to just take the training. I'm going to be data science. I'm tech. But, if I think what I'm hearing you say is that it's better to have those well-rounded skill sets and be able to communicate and be that bridge between the tech mind and the, not so tech mind. And if you can have those skills and be able to communicate on, yes, a very highly technical level, and then maybe not so technical for those such as yourself who don't need all that tech, like that's really, that right there is really the winning combination, if you will.
Yeah, and I think it's true for anyone in ad tech today. I can't say every career, that would be a little ridiculous, but in particular in ad tech, for myself, I'm a third generation salesperson. There's no way that I was not going to go into sales. Like, just driven. My every member of my, you hear about these families that are like firefighters or
Yeah.
police people, right? Like, yeah, salespeople. That's what the Gordons are. And and so when I went into marketing, I was spending evenings. I'd stick around the office, and in evenings, I was teaching myself coding and scripting languages. I was teaching myself database languages. I was just trying to ingest as much as I could. And the benefit there was that when I ended up leaving that role, I actually called my cousin. He was the head of IT at Ramapo University. I said, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going back to school. I'm going to take computer science. And he told me, don't. He said, the kids here today are so much faster and they're so much more dedicated, but you have a skill that they don't have. You have the ability to translate. You know
Mhm.
the sales side. Now you're picking up the operations side, the product and operations side. They need someone who's able to translate between the two, someone who has multiple proficiencies.
Yep.
And and that has served me so well in my career. It literally, I don't want to tell them, but it's the best advice I've ever given.
That is really interesting. That is a really good point because yes, these kids are amazing. I mean, they really are amazing. I mean, my son, I have my own private, he's 11. He's my own personal IT guy. I mean, he was doing Python at age 10. He codes. I mean, it's just like crazy. Like I can't, my brain can't even handle it. So, now I'm trying to work on like, okay, let's make sure that our writing and our English and all that is good too, because, it's great that you're this amazing math and science IT guy, but you got to have that well-rounded. So that's a really good point. And Maria says her family was engineers and teachers, so she knows what you're talking about. And just out of
And just a
curiosity.
side note there, and I want to make sure that I'm just super clear to the audience. Like, you can have a good career, right? You could be a great computer scientist, data scientist. You have a good career. I'm talking about what the delta is between good and great. And
Mm,
I've just seen that across multiple organizations. Those people that shine, that everybody talks about, that really they're involved in every cool new project, and they're the first person that's tapped. I got to go fly across the country and meet with this Fortune 100 client. I want so and so with me. Like, those are the people. Those are the differentiations. You could have a great career, and if crunching numbers is your jam and you love it, I fully support that. I think that's the greatest thing in the
yeah,
world.
definitely. No, thank you for saying that. It is, there's something for everyone. That is why we are here. And just out of curiosity, you came from a family of salespeople, father, grandfather. What did they sell? I'm just curious.
Oh my gosh. So my mother sold real estate.
Nice.
My father, still to this day, he's 77. He sells paper, the paper they make corrugated boxes out of.
Mhm.
You would be surprised, and this is before the pandemic and Amazon, when everything came in a box. I think there's a David Schwimmer movie where he says even boxes come in boxes. But there is just, it's an amazingly lucrative career that, like, just the nicest people in the world, most of them based out of the Midwest. So my dad
Okay.
still does that. He puts like about 60,000 miles on a vehicle. If you live in Chicago, you maybe move. I don't know. You maybe shouldn't be driving, but um,
I grew up in Chicago, so I'm Midwest born and bred. I love it. I love the Midwest work ethic. I
yep,
love my family, very working class, kind of same deal. So I love that.
yep. My uncles sold food. My grandfather sold insurance. You name it. We were bred to be outgoing people that knew the sales trade, and that's kind of the component. And I just deviated slightly by adding some extra layers to myself that allowed me to get to what I do in particular is a solution sale. So I
Hmm.
don't sell widgets. I don't have a thing that I sell. Our data asset, and I don't know if I dove into this, I don't think I did, but we start with identity. So Adstra, through reputable sources, collects what we call a national consumer file. So for the United States, we have a list of every marketable person in the United States, the individual and their household. We collect 40 years of trended data, so we know where they've lived in the past, so we can better match to old files. If you think about myself that recently moved to Santa Barbara, but I lived in Las Vegas, so Bed Bath & Beyond probably has an old address for me rather than a new one. We're able to associate that. We compensate brands and publishers to collect mobile IDs and IP addresses, cookies, and hashed email addresses, and we associate all that raw data into an identity true set. And then on top of that, we add attribute data, age, income, marital status, various categories. We're able to identify the wealthiest 1% of the United States, which is really important to some of the luxury brands, et cetera. And then we license that in a compliant manner to advertisers to allow them to better communicate with customers.
That is so fascinating. That's kind of what I wanted to know about. Like, it is a little scary though. It is,
Yeah.
but it isn't. Like, I don't know. Like, does anyone feel any discomfort with that at all? Knowing that these companies, everyone pretty much has the goods on everyone. I mean, nothing is sacred these days.
Well, remember, you can opt out, and that's the key point, right? So anyone
Yeah,
can
but
opt.
realistically, like, who does that? You know, like, this goes back to the whole, do you read the 30 pages? Like, I don't think
Right.
I don't know if I might have opted out like 2 times. I set the privacy thing on my phone, and I do the browsing. You can do like the private browser. I don't think it makes a difference really, but
Yeah, and then as you engage with brands, right, and you're sharing your data, they add you into their files as well. And there's obviously an opt-out component there as well. And I think again, it isn't perfect, but it's a good balance between the consumer rights and the needs for the marketing component of it. I think if you went to one extreme and cut off one or the other, you would have unintended consequences. Um, but yeah, so we do this all above board with regards to industry. What we think is not only what we think, what the industry thinks, what the law says around these data sets and how they're utilized.
and here's what's interesting. Yeah, Malcolm says he's been aware of it as well, but he's still not completely comfortable. Tabitha says she's aware since the mid 80s. I think, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but like my brain says that we as consumers have basically handed this over to advertisers on a silver platter organically over time, because oh wow, look at this Facebook, it's so cool, click. And then we have these grocery store cards, and then we have our credit cards, everything's electronically tracked. So I mean, let's be honest about it. There's really no way around it unless you just are in a cash society and you completely get off social media. I mean, it is what it is. I guess I take comfort that everyone is in the same boat. Everyone's being tracked.
Well, I mean, there are ways around it, right? Again, so you don't take the shopper card, right? Or maybe you do what I do,
And
you
you
take
don't get your discounts and your coupons.
your
Come
parents'
on.
phone number. I'm joking, but I think that there is a balance. I think it's about education. I do think that one of the great things that's come around about a lot of the spotlights that have happened in the industry is that consumers are much more aware of what's going on in the background. Because I'll be honest, when I worked previously in other roles and in early days, when you saw all these things that were popping up and friends that were sharing different components, which Game of Thrones character do I look like, et cetera, I kind of cringed. I'm like, do you really, it just smelled like a bad actor that was doing
Yeah, it
things
did.
on board. And so we spend quite a bit of time, as do our colleagues. Every company I worked at is very good about the privacy side of it, about making sure that when the data is collected, it's collected in a proper way, that there's audits components that happen around this. There's a tremendous amount of work that happens behind the scenes. I can appreciate from the consumer perspective, my gosh, someone knows something about me that I didn't intend for them to know. Again, I think that's the education component of saying, okay, I'm going to take action on that, and I'm going to redact that component around it.
Interesting. Yeah. And we're not mad at you, Scott. We know this is the way of the
I
world.
don't take it personally at all.
We're not giving you a hard time.
No.
I find it so fascinating, really. I mean, I could talk about this all day and we can debate and we can go back and forth. And I just think it's so fascinating. And for those of us on this call, they've got a bright future ahead of them at doing a career, having a career in this. So, I mean, I do think it is what it is. It's the way of the world.
Well, it is, but it isn't static. And that's the whole thing, right? Like dialogues like this are important because people become educated. And if no one said anything, then nothing would have changed, right?
Mhm.
The change is good. And from
Yeah.
a company level, we support that change. The
Mhm.
reality is that we're doing what we think is right by the consumer today. And if those happen to change, we are in a position to adapt to that change.
Yeah, for sure.
At the end of the day, Another cousin of mine created a social network where you had to pay, but no data was sold of yours whatsoever.
Hmm.
And it hasn't done nearly as well as Facebook. And
Mm.
so to my point, well, to your point, to expand upon it, is part of it is the responsibility of the industry. Part of it could potentially be the apathy of the consumer. I don't know about
Yeah.
everyone. I'm not saying everybody's apathetic, but I am saying that there was a huge demand for this, then his social network would be going through the roof because everybody would be saying, absolutely, I will pay $20 a year to be able to engage with my friends and not have anything done with my data. And that's important to me. But it isn't.
I
Or
feel
maybe
like people just don't think about it. I feel like people forget and we just kind of go on with our lives and we
Mhm.
don't necessarily think about the implication. I mean, that's just me speaking. I mean,
Right.
I'm a newscaster, so I have a different perspective. I voluntarily have given up my privacy and I've been putting myself out there for 20 some plus years now. So I have always been in this mentality of watching my P's and Q's, knowing that everything and anything I do could come back to haunt me. So I think I'm in a different headspace. I've just accepted it, but I feel like the rest of society is under the same constraints. They just don't know it. And that I think is that's where it gets a little dicey because I'm fully aware and I accept the fact that I have zero privacy. Anybody could look me up anytime and know almost anything about me. And I'm gonna say I'm 100% comfortable with that, but I've accepted that. But I feel like for the general consumer, I feel like they haven't accepted that. And so that's where it gets interesting to me. That's where it gets a little fuzzy.
It does. And I think there's a lot of different aspects within our society where you see this. And so I was struck, I was reading the newspaper this weekend, obviously Memorial Day. There's a photo of a woman. It was striking. She was by the tombstone of what I believe was her husband. She had her baby in a carriage next to it, a little car seat, and she was laying down crying, and her head was covered. And as I saw that, I said, that's a really moving photo, but does she know someone took a photo of her like that? Like at that very private moment when she was like having an engagement with her deceased husband, and someone took a photo, put it on the front page, it went viral, and her name, and now her private moment is spread beyond. And I
Wow.
think we see a lot of examples of areas where maybe change could and should happen in the industry. Again, we believe that we're on the forefront of the industry. We apply these standards more broadly than they need to because we think it's right. And I think discussions like this, even though I'm not a privacy person, right? I'm just talking to you as a person in the industry and a consumer
Mhm.
personally, who by the way hasn't opted out because I haven't felt like anything in my life has ever changed from the data that's there. I have really nothing to hide.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of people feel like that too. Like, I got nothing to hide. Like, who cares? I
yeah,
think that's also goes along with it.
but conversations like this are great because that's how the change happens.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, let's just say nothing is sacred and we'll move on with this conversation. um, Someone had asked, how would you suggest we best use data science to optimize our funnels in a newly D2C world? Direct to consumer world.
Direct to consumer. Oh, this is a great question. So when you look at trends that are happening in the industry, direct to consumer, it's blowing up. I like to think about these things as forcing factors. So, like Zoom, for example, my parents use Zoom. They would never FaceTime with me at all, right? They had no engagement in that until COVID occurred. We were in a pandemic, and that was the only thing that they could do. They didn't do any kind of remote shopping, and suddenly they're Amazon members. Like these are things that occur in our lives that force us out of our comfort zone. Talked about that earlier with like career side too. And companies are seeing this as well. And so when you look, I think of one example of a global appliance manufacturer, and they're starting to look at like how do they move direct to consumer in a world where they would only sell their products through big box stores. You go to Lowe's, you go to Home Depot, you go, is there even any Sears anymore? I don't know. But these are the places that they would go to, even potentially Amazon to some extent. Though again, there's some walled garden components and challenges with that. But these companies are starting to realize like what are the skill sets that need to be implemented and who are the people that we need, the people and the tools and services that we need in order to better understand our consumers and communicate with them directly in a region when they haven't done this at all. And so this is fascinating. One of the things that they look at is like new movers. So this is a big driver, right? So people that are moving from one place to another are typically more likely to buy appliances because these are life events that occur. So how do you identify people that are potentially moving? You look at like,
I'm raising my hand. That would be
oh,
me.
I'm like, okay, I'll pause. I'm talking too much.
No, I'm like, that's me. I just moved cross country. I'm just raising my hand. Sorry, go ahead.
100%. Me as well, right? You move, you have these life events, you get married, you have children, you move. Those are core components of what occurs. So now companies are having to face this reality of I need data scientists, I need data for data scientists to work with, right? In a compliant manner. I need the tools that they can utilize to take best advantage of that data set. And where do I get those signals that are coming through? And how do I understand, in some cases, what would seem very simple as a mover, it really isn't that simple. Are you moving from your parents' house to buy a house, or are you renting a place? How do I understand better before you're moving, better anticipate your needs? So, what used to happen is that we just look at national change of address, which is basically that form you fill out at the Postal Service, or you go, sometimes we do it for the coupons, right? And that's how they track it. The US Postal Service sells that list of people that are potentially moving and have registered themselves with their new addresses. They license it technically. But there's a lot more signals than that. The websites you visit, I'm looking at so searching for moving services, relocation packages, etc. The location on devices, my IP address suddenly changed to a different state of my set-top box that I use for my Roku device or something like that. These are all indicators that get fed in to a database that data scientists are using to better understand how people are moving, which is important to a brand, a global appliance manufacturer that is looking to sell direct to consumer. So I think that this move, and it's not unique, there are a ton of companies that are just moving direct to consumer and trying to follow different models. If you look at the media companies, so Netflix set the bar, right? They had a closed ecosystem where you register for a Netflix account, they have your email address, you've validated yourself by giving a credit card, so it's pretty sure that it's you because a credit card company says it is. And now you're watching these shows and they give predictions on what shows you'll like. How does a Disney or a Fox or a Warner compete with that? They launch their own services, but they have a whole bunch of other components too. Disney has theme parks. They have stores where you can buy products. You have all these identity signals that need to come through and get associated with all the meta transaction data to better understand, better profile customers. And so, so from a DTC perspective, I think that the skills around data science are going to be huge. I think also understanding data and data sourcing is going to be very important because, again, as we talk about people that achieve that greatness in their field, the ability not only to understand and analyze the data, but also make recommendations on where you might be able to get deeper insights and bring those to bear is critical as well.
Talk about your business in particular, how it may have shifted because of COVID and the pandemic. And is that a permanent change, or are there some permanent changes going forward? What do you see with regard to that COVID and marketing, data science, digital advertising?
So holistically, COVID took a blip. So when you look at the entire industry, like March and April caused a lot of concern. Advertisers naturally pulled back. What we learned is that advertisers pulled back because they needed to learn how to communicate with consumers again. So you had all these ads out there with people without masks on, right? We'll come in and we'll fix your plumbing, but they don't have a mask and they're not gloved, and the message isn't about hygiene. So they needed to stop and take a beat, pull that back, make sure that their businesses were going to recover, that they saw some sort of light at the end of the tunnel, but then rechange everything so they can change the messaging and how it impacted consumers. Restaurants, quick service had to change messaging. They had to talk about how you could take things out, right? Take out food, how it's cleanly prepared.
Mhm.
So the entire industry saw that and that change. We, as a nimble company, realized it was an opportunity to not only give back. So we were part of a couple different efforts, including with AWS, to give data to first responding organizations to help combat or learn more about COVID, right? How great to know the number of people that are octogenarians within a certain zip code so you can reallocate your resources so that you're serving those most needed. I have a neighbor, he's 93. 3 weeks after the shot came out and he has nurses coming in and out, I called him, I said, hey, Gene, I just want to make sure someone got you the shot. He's like, no, no one's talked about it yet. And I'm like, hold on, if like, we live in a great community with wonderful healthcare and very great outreach services, and no one's reached out to you to make sure that you're taken care of. You're 93 in a tremendously high at-risk group. We were able to get them shot within 24 hours. It was great, but those sorts of services, I think, was what was occurring within COVID. Now, what you're seeing is it's twofold. It's number one, and I think this is blended also with the privacy regulations that are coming about. It's companies want to own their own data. They want to have their own data sets. They don't want to be relying on third parties. And so we've adapted our business model, creating what we call portable data module, where we license our data sets that sit within a client's four walls, their AWS, Google Cloud, Azure instance, and allow them to utilize that data in a privacy compliant manner to those consumers who have, they've engaged with, that they have some sort of relationship with. Rather than what the traditional model was, which was send the data out to someone else where you have potential data leakage and then bring the data back in.
Oh,
So we see
that's
that.
interesting.
Oh, sorry.
I say that's interesting. That's cool. So that's a shift and you see that continuing.
100%. I see more efficiencies. I see a greater reliance on data sets and how it's utilized. And again, like I said, I think data scientists are the rock stars of our industry. Like, as more direct-to-consumer brands realize the importance and they have that gap that they need to fill, the first thing they're gonna have to fill is people. And the second thing they're gonna have to fill is the process components, and the third thing is data.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that you see an abundance of jobs continuing in data science within, not just like what your company does, but the actual companies themselves that want to have proprietary ownership over their data. So
Yeah.
so that's cool. That's good. And that's all industries mostly.
It's all, you have to imagine that the industries that are like the ad tech industries, what we would traditionally call the indirect, they're DSPs, DMPs, et cetera. Anybody that's been helping to facilitate the advertising, those are fairly saturated. They've been using data scientists for years. And then after that, agency holding companies started building, well, first of all, they started buying data companies. Think IPG, think WPP, they purchased whole data companies, kind of like an Adstra. And then, so now what's left? It's the brands. But the good news is there's a lot of brands. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of brands. And the cost for data, not only the cost for the data itself, for licensing it, but the infrastructure required to run the data has dropped tremendously. What does that mean? It means that more companies can afford to bring in data sets and upsize their marketing efforts.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so all industries, I think, CPG, retail, travel, you name it, everyone's trying to learn more about their customers. Everybody's trying to learn how to better communicate with their customers, especially now when you see, I mean, just look at politically, right? How divisive the country is around COVID, how like separated people are, and it's almost part of their identity. It's to a religious level in some sense. Understanding how to communicate with your customers outside of geography is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Someone was asking, we kind of touched on this maybe a little bit, but your opinion, what are some important educational criteria when considering a career in marketing? And I know a lot of our people are into data science, but maybe they want to have, maybe they should take some marketing courses if they want to go in this direction.
Yeah, I think core marketing courses are good. I really think that some of the best experience that you're going to get in the marketing field is like on the job, sort of in the trenches. But I do think that if you look at marketing of the past, so so for example, I ran marketing for an internet security software company. And my job was in particular on the performance base. So it was all these affiliate networks and managing the outbound reach for that. How do we message them? They would basically bring us a customer and we would pay for that customer in a referral fee. Now you have companies like Rakuten that are building huge data infrastructures across multiple different products and aligning all those insights, both known to the individual and aggregated at a geographic level. Like the amount of insights that are being generated by a company like that is really impressive. So I think that if I were starting out and I was in data science and I wanted to get marketing experience, I would make sure that the component of marketing experience I had was, and again, you should follow your passion. If creative's your passion, you should definitely be in that space, but I would definitely make sure that some of the quantitative fields are in there. Some of the almost STEM-like fields, those are so important to marketing, and I don't think they're changing. We used to joke at Experian, it wasn't even really a joke, but just almost dream. We're like, wow, what if we could convince creatives to use data to better inform how they create an ad, the visual. And we tried for years, and we would always run into the artistic component of, no, I know what I'm going for, and I don't need data to help me inform how I should create the visual component, the content side of the ad. Guess what? They're doing that now, which is amazing. Everything's pushing towards the algorithmic utilization of data.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I can't think of what these companies are, but my husband works in gaming and they have these
Video
third
game
party.
or
He represents the top video gamers in the world. So he's the brand partnership director, partnering the brands with the gamers. So I don't know if it's Adstra, but companies like yours who provide all of this information so that he can get the information and so that the brands can execute their campaigns. And it's this information is vital because it really helps with drilling down and making sure you're meeting the needs of the clients, if you will. So it's and I see that more and more. They pay big money for these data sets, right? And that's what your company does, is you guys are collecting that data, providing it to brands and advertisers, I guess.
Exactly.
That's
And,
cool.
and I think that's so true. It's really interesting. It brings up another really cool use case. I have a colleague, he's leading up a company called Creator IQ. And when you think about it from a data perspective, they work with social influencers, which, when you talk about gamers, it kind of reminds me the same thing, right? You have an influencer.
Yes, it's the same thing. Yes, like exactly. I think I've even heard of that.
And so what Creator IQ does, which is so brilliant, is that every advertiser, let's say I'm an influencer for travel. I love to travel. Boy, that would be a great retirement career, but let's just say I'm an influencer for travel. So American Airlines would come to me and say, hey, Scott, we want to reach your followers through you. So we're going to sponsor a trip and you're going to do something. And then suddenly you're going to reach all these people. But I'm the bottleneck. I'm the filter, right? They reach on my channel and then I reach these people. So there's no programmatic effect. Remember we talked a little bit about how consumers want to see this engagement. They multi-touch, right? We want to feel like we're part of conversation. We want to hear it in a couple different channels. That's what brings familiarity. It helps kind of drive that marketing experience. So what Creator IQ is doing is they're bringing programmatic to the influencer. And the way that they're doing it from a data science perspective, we have this concept of lookalike models. You take a small panel And then you extrapolate that across the entire US. And so that panel becomes the seed. And so companies like Nielsen do this today when they're watching, television performance, et cetera. There's a lot of different use cases for it, but it's basically a mathematical algorithm that extrapolates a small group set into a large one. And so Creator IQ is doing that at the individual level with the influencer. So myself as an influencer, I've spent so much time and energy curating an audience that likes travel. If they know more about me, they're going to know more about my audience. And then they can go reach that audience in any channel, even outside of my own. A fascinating utilization of data.
Yeah, that's what my husband does. That's so cool. And this is kind of cool because maybe some people on this call don't, now they're learning that these data science skills are so valuable that maybe there are some people on here who love data science and have that creative aspect to them and say, hey, this sounds really cool. Like I could be the person that helps be the bridge, connect, grabbing that data and putting it out there through companies like yours that connect the brands. So that's like a really cool growing field, as you've said.
It is. I'm quite jealous.
I
I have a great feel. I love my job. I love what I do, but I admire our data science teams.
Yeah.
In every company I've worked at, they're just really, really smart people that have an amazing ability to gain insight and deliver so much value to our clients. It's incredible.
Your company sounds really cool, by the way. Do you have any data science openings or any opportunities for internships, or what, if anyone's interested in learning more, what
So
should they
people can reach out to me, and I'm happy to provide my email address. It's scott.gordon@adstradata.com. And feel free to reach out to me. I don't know off the top of my head what the openings are, but I will, some advice I'll give for what it's worth, just because it's in line. Having been on the job market before and kind of seen what works and what doesn't, the sad truth is that, and I don't have firsthand knowledge of this is an observation, but what I've observed is that by the time the job is posted, it's pretty much filled.
Yeah.
The job market, even despite demand, it is so competitive, and it is so easy for people now to submit resumes, and the resumes go through a machine, and you kind of put on one bucket or another, depending on the words you use in your resume. So there's some people I know that get jobs and they're just hunted. That's wonderful. For myself, I've had to do it a different way. And the way I do it is I network my butt off. Outside of my, like, at Experian, I knew everybody in every division across global. Like if there was someone at a bar with an Experian badge at a conference, I was going to spend 5 minutes to get to know that person. I was going to send them an email afterwards. I was going to network with them. So it's the long way around the barn is that when you think about finding a job, whether or not we have a job posting should be irrelevant to anyone. It should be, who are the people that I want to work with, and what is the company that I want to work at, and let that drive everything. And then just do your best to network in and raise your hand and say, yes, this is of interest to me.
Well, Scott, that is great advice. I mean, that's basically the advice that we've heard from a lot of people on these fireside chats. And I'm just going to kind of play devil's advocate for a second. That is awesome for you. You're in sales. I imagine you are a networking genius. My husband's in sales, same thing. He'd go to every conference, everywhere, every day of the week if he could. Me, even though I'm work in the media, I'm not, I like my downtime. Like when I'm on, and when I'm off, I'm not really always up for that. So what should we do for those of us who are not the super type A, such as yourself? Maybe networking doesn't come second nature to us. So how can we fix that?
It's a really good point. And again, I don't think I have a silver bullet or one size fits all, but I will say that, that you can modify that to fit your comfort level. So for example, if I was not an extrovert, it kind of goes back to the other thing. By my advice, you would be talking to anybody and taking any kind of role. But if you took my previous advice and found that one company and then identified the people that are working there And then maybe identify, I mean, LinkedIn's wonderful. You can find out the groups that they're involved in. And then you join that group, and then you just very casually meet someone that has a common interest that you do. I mean, I think you can't rely on just a machine or a resume to promote yourself. Some people can, right? They have amazing recipes. But I think that if you really want to be competitive, you have to kind of think a little bit differently and work outside your comfort zones. It doesn't mean talking to a million people, but it really means just building, like, just like we talk about with consumers where they need multiple touch points. Same thing with jobs. They need multiple touch points. They need something that speaks beyond that sheet of paper that you have. So to that end, like, if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to promote, to help network, like in whatever capacity someone wants. I've learned long ago, I get really excited about trying to find people jobs. I need to dial it back a little bit and let them show me their interest, because I can go in a million different directions. But I'm happy to help, because that's what's helped me, right? I think also finding the right mentor is another good component, which is the theme, right, from what we're here for. Having someone who has been there before, that can guide you, that can give you advice, that can vouch for you. Quite frankly, again, networking, and then also people who just advocated for me and said, I know you as a person, I respect and trust you, this person respects and trusts me, the correlative effect is applicable. They're willing to take the interview. And very candidly, it was never you got the job. It was, I am willing to give you a courtesy interview to hear you out and have you tell me why you're the right person for this role.
Can I also add something in here that I want to reiterate? Maybe you'll agree with this. If someone doesn't email you back right away, or maybe they don't respond on LinkedIn, or maybe you've sent them 3 or 4 emails and they haven't responded, then you think, oh my gosh, that person hates me. And then it discourages you, and then you quit and you want to give up. Please reiterate this to me, because I need to hear this, that no, it's nothing personal. This is a problem that I have.
You know what, the way I diffuse that, for whatever it's worth, again, I don't have silver bullets, but I address it right away. So if I write someone an email 5 times and they haven't responded to me,
Which you've had to, right? Because you're in sales, right?
I've done that, but I've even done that for jobs. I'll say, like, hey, I apologize if I'm being aggressive, if I'm bothering you. I'm sure you have a million things going on.
So you actually say that. You actually have written that in an email,
Absolutely, because you know why? Number one, no one does it. So it's unique, it's human. And you're going to get a response one way or the other, most often because the person feels guilty. That's okay. And you're just basically being real and saying, hey, I'm not trying to be annoying. This is just something that's important to me, and I want to get closure on it one way or the other. If there's a path forward, I would appreciate your help.
Interesting.
And you end up getting the 10-minute, like, okay, fine, I'll give you 10 minutes to hear you out, but it's 10 minutes before.
That's interesting. I've always just sent it, I've resent like, if I've sent 1 or 2, then I'll send a 3rd, or over time, not every day, but like circling back around on this ... so that they know that I've sent to her. I just, I never want to call them out or be like, why haven't you responded? And I haven't done the apology approach, because I have to be persistent in the news media. You don't work in LA without being a bit annoying, I'm sure. But I've had to really, really drill down on people. But I've never tried the, sorry for being annoying or whatever. But I like that. I'm gonna try that next time.
The reality is that you got to step back and realize that it isn't you, right?
Right.
We all have a lot going on in our lives, and and so there could be any number of things. And gosh, there's a meme going around, and it really resonated with me, and I feel a little neglectful that I can't recall it verbatim, but effectively it was like, you just can't assume that the person that's being rude or standoffish or something is being rude or standoffish because that's their personality. They can have a lot going on beyond that shell that you're not aware of. And so you have to just give them the benefit of the doubt. And that's the way I approach these sorts of things, is out of compassion. Is that I don't know what's going on with them, but how can I make it easier for them to help me? And sometimes I'll say that too, like, what can I do? Is there something I can do to make this process easier for you? Can I give you a quick summary? Would you like to just hand me off to someone else? At
Yeah,
least-
I've done that. Is there a better person? Is there someone? Yeah, I've done that. And you
So
can't tell tone on email. I'm just reminding everybody of that too, because I could be, years of therapy is helping me realize all of this. So
that
been
works too.
there.
There's a lot of sides to it, but I will say that the struggle is real. Everybody has the same problems. It's like there's a few groups that I know, oddly enough, a lot of them data scientists who have no problem getting jobs right now. Everybody else, they have to grind a little bit for it. But I think that's
Yeah.
okay, right? It shows that you really want that thing. So
Yeah.
my sister-in-law, she works at Universal, and uh, she's not in sales, and she's a very nice person, but she doesn't really have that outgoing kind of like sales personality thing.
Mhm.
Um, she went after her job for a year,
Mm.
a year
That's
of
good. That's a lot of persistence.
at least once a month reaching out. She made a compelling argument on why she was the person for the job, even though she did not have the experience for the job, and they
Mm.
gave it to her because for a
Cool. I
year
love stories like that. I
it was.
love that.
Me too. I was just like, wow, you go get it, right? You knew what you wanted. You knew that it was yours and you took it. Like
Mhm.
there was nothing that was going to stand in her way from getting it. And she wasn't obnoxious. Like I said, she maybe, once a month she was reaching out, but she was talking to people that she knew in the industry. She wasn't a hardcore networker, but she was a nice person. She was educating herself on what was needed for the role. And then she made a cogent argument on why her skill sets were the right fit. And she's
Mm.
continued to move up in the organization. I couldn't be more proud of her, though of course I had nothing to do with it, but I was just so happy for her that she was able to achieve her dream and get the dream job that she really always wanted.
That's awesome. Oh, one more thing I think that you've probably done this is I love if you're trying to break through to someone and you're reaching out to them and they're just not getting back to you or whatever. Obviously you could have a friend introduce you. That recently worked for me. And then because that was someone I thought that hated me that never got back to me. And then all of a sudden they did. And I'm kind of joking because I know they
It's
don't hate me,
right.
but that's where your brain goes.
Familiarity.
But also sending people a link to something that they've done. Hey, just wanted to tell you, saw this story that you did, blah, 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 thought it was you a great job. You guys did some nice work, or I was really moved by this or that. I mean, is that a good thing to do sometimes?
Absolutely, right? Because it shows that you're following them, that you're understanding the industry. Even if you're able to pepper in some things like, I saw you wrote that, I thought that was great, and what do you think about this? Right? And, oh, by the way, tip, never ask yes or no questions. Like if they can answer it yes or no, you shouldn't be asking that question.
Mm,
If you want to engage, make sure you ask a question where they have to write more than one word.
yeah.
Because that'll get the communication going and at least it'll get on their radar a little bit. Um, I don't think we're there yet, but I do think like we use video in our sales outreach. So we have a team that goes out and approaches new clients, and they actually do custom videos for each client to the person that they're trying to reach.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
success rate is like 70% people take the meeting just because it's so different and unique and humanizing. And I don't know if we're there yet with jobs, but I wouldn't be surprised if it came soon.
I know some people in the media that have done that. They've done like a little video intro montage, because they work in television, but these are all great professional stalking tips. I've used every one of them. Some work, some take a little longer than others, but thank you, Scott. These are all great advice, great tips, great reminders when we're job hunting, whether it be data science or any field, really. I mean, these are all just great things. So, well, I think we're going to wrap up here in a minute. Before we do, does anyone else have any final questions before I let Scott give his final thoughts? Anyone else want to chime in via the chat or actually talk to us here? I feel like I'm hogging the whole Q&A. I like little.
Oh, that's your job.
But it is fun when other people ask questions too. But anyway, I have really enjoyed this. So since we don't have, it looks like we've done a good job covering all the bases, but I'll let you give us some final thoughts, Scott, and then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead.
Well, I think this is a conversation that could go on for hours. I love data and I love the concepts of it. And there's just so much opportunity in this space, and both from a professional level and from the industry at large. I think it's really exciting. I appreciate and I'm really grateful that you gave me an opportunity to come chat with you. I got a lot from it as well. And my only final thoughts is that if anyone needs any help at all, I'm always happy to help contribute. I can't help people find jobs per se, but I'm always happy to help network, to give advice and thoughts. And they have my contact information. Feel free to reach out at any time.
That's awesome. Yeah, your email's in the chat. I'm going to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much, Scott. Thank you all for being part of this fireside chat. It's scott.gordon@adstradata.com, correct? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. And I guess we'll hand it back over to you guys to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming, everybody. And you'll be getting the post fireside chat survey to let us know how you liked it. And thank you again, Scott. We really enjoyed having you. This was a great deep dive into this part of the industry. And we'll see you guys all at the next one.